Let me just dive right into it. So welcome to the non-STEM alumni graduate student discussion forum. My name is Shilpi Nanda, and I would be the chair for today and also representing the law faculty. I really hope that this next 1.5 hours is really useful for our attendees. And they get a good insight into the NUS graduates' journey from multiple faculties. All right, so let's see who our panelists are. We have two sets of panelists today. One is our alumnus panel, and one would be our student panel. So beginning with our alumni, we have our panel can have a small wave just for the attendees to recognize them. And I'm not sure if the network can handle so many videos. So once I introduce you all, we'll probably shut down the video and only turn it on when you speak and the Q&A question when it's directed to you. So yes, we have Professor Natarajan. He's an assistant professor at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. His nationality is Indian, and he graduated from the NUS Business School in 2019. So thank you for joining us, Professor Natarajan. Next, we have Professor Hartley with us. He is an assistant professor and a program leader at the Education University of Hong Kong. His nationality is American, and he graduated from Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy in 2016. Thanks, Professor Hartley, for taking the time.
Thank you. I'm unable to turn on my video, so if somebody would allow me to do that, I'm happy to do so.
Yes, no worries. Just happy to have you here. Yeah, we'll sort it out, I hope, when we ask you questions.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, we have Professor Ying. She's an associate professor from Tsinghua University. Her nationality is Chinese. She graduated from Faculty of Arts. He graduated from the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences in 2016. I'm so sorry, Professor. Welcome. Then we have Professor Chen. Her nationality is Singaporean. She graduated in 2015 from NUS Saw Swee Hock School of Public Health. She's also currently posted as an assistant professor. So that would be our alumni panel for today. As you can see, the panel we have is quite diverse, which we're very proud of at NUS. Now I'll just move on quickly to the student panelists. We have Houning, who's a 5th year NUS Business School PhD candidate. His nationality is Chinese. We have Bhavya, who is our 3rd year Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy candidate. Her nationality is Indian. We have Cera, who's our 3rd year Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, Department of English. Her nationality is Singaporean. And we have Nabanita, who's our 5th year School of Design and Engineering PhD candidate, particularly architecture. Her nationality is Bangladeshi. Thank you all for taking the time to join. So I'll just dive into the structure of our discussion today. And the way we'll do this is that I will give 2 to 3 minutes to each panelist to speak about their NUS journey. So all the panelists feel free to talk about any element of your journey that you would like. And if you see my raise hand option, it just means that you want to wrap it up soon because we've crossed the 3-minute mark. After all panelists have spoken, I will then open the floor for questions. Attendees, you can see that there's a Q&A box feature in the bottom of your window. When you type a question, you can also vote for the most interesting question. So I'll try to pick questions from there. We'll have 45 minutes of question answers. You can direct the question to a particular panelist, or I can direct the question, or even a panelist can raise their hands if they would like to answer the question. When answering a question, please put on your video, and when also giving us your graduate journey, please put on your video. That would be amazing. So yeah, without further ado, what we would do is begin with our student panelists. So maybe Houning can begin by telling us about his graduate journey.
Oh, okay. I didn't expect it starting from me, but I'll be very brief and concise. As our chairperson have kind of introduced, I'm fifth-year PhD student at NUS Business School doing finance. But I'm actually coming from an economic background. I did my undergraduate in economics, a few minutes downtown in SMU. So that kind of background gave me almost a wide range of research interest. Those topics encompass corporate finance, labor economics, as well as sociology. My current research interest is basically centered around corporate compensation policy, how you pay and how you manage your pay to your employees, and also how firms invest in human capital. All right. So my journey in US has been really fulfilling. It has been almost 4.5 years. So faculty here are extremely supportive, but the most important things is they strike a great balance between mentorship and advising, and also they give enough freedom to me, to explore what I want, to navigate my research interest, because I think this really foster, foster my research interest. I'm driving by my interest, so it's not compulsory. It gave me a lot of mentorship as well. So as the last session, both professor have mentioned about the value of availability. I think the faculty at NUS Business School especially, and the finance and accounting department, they are always available for students. We don't even have to have an appointment with them. If we have questions, if we have something to consult, we can always knock the door and just swing by. So I find this extremely valuable. It gave me a lot of chances to grow, not only as a scholar, but also as a person overall. Yeah. So with that, I wrap up my self-introduction about my NUS journey.
That is so interesting to hear, Houning. Thank you for sharing with us. I do agree with you. It is important to join an institute where you feel like you belong and you can even grow as a person more than just as a scholar. So yes, absolutely. Thanks for sharing.
Yep.
We'll come back to you more in our Q&A question round. But now we'll move on to Pavia, who's, like I said, a third year at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. Pavia, would you please share with us your graduate journey so far?
Hi, thank you so much, Shilpi, and I'm very glad to be a part of this panel to share my experience so far. So I'm from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, and I'm doing a PhD in Public Policy. So before sharing my experience, I just want to talk a little bit about my background. So my undergrad degree was in economics from Delhi, and then my master's was in international relations. And then a large part of why I wanted to do a PhD in public policy was because I was really drawn to interdisciplinary and to multidisciplinary research. And for that reason, I feel that the LKY school is it's very interdisciplinary. It is very accepting of multidisciplinary research, and my research interests right now also are broadly at the intersection of three fields like economics and political economy and public policy. And I feel that the school has really, there's all kinds of faculty there doing all kinds of things. And apart from the professors, I feel like I also learn a lot from the students, because we are all specializing in kind of different areas, and then it comes together because public policy is an overarching thing in all of our research. So as for my experience so far, it's been interesting because the way the PhD program is structured is the first 2 years we have coursework. So I just got done with coursework and I passed the first part of my qualifying examination. And now I feel this is exactly this is kind of the start of my journey as a researcher, because now I'm finally working independently on my own topic. And I'm really, really liking the opportunities that come to me, both because of my supervisor and also because of the opportunities that the school has provided for us in terms of conferences or in terms of listening to people who are, eminent personalities in the field. But having said that, I feel that this is just the part of my journey. So I can't really sum up the NUS experience in totality, because I feel like I've just started and I have a few more years to go at least. So yeah, thank you.
Pavia, thanks for sharing. I think I find it so interesting that you say, this is the start of your journey. When you finish your first year, or, some people give this exam after 18 months, this qualification exam that we have at Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, even in law. I agree with you. It's because a lot of students enter and they think they need to have everything figured out, but actually they don't. And you get that time, you get the first year to really think and speak to academics and get your ideas together. Thanks for sharing, Bhavya. We'll come back to that. Thank you.
Shilpi, you're muted, I think.
Whoops, sorry guys. Now we're going to move on to Cera, who is our third-year Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences PhD candidate. She's from the Department of English. So yeah, Cera, looking forward to your talk.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep this short because I have renovations going on above me. I don't know when they'll start drilling again. So I'm Cera. I'm from the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, or recently renamed College of Humanities and Sciences. I'm enrolled in a joint degree program in literature at NUS and in digital humanities at King's College London. My research fields include critical theory, cultural theory, media theory, and continental philosophy. I'm happy to take any questions pertaining to doing a PhD in humanities or applying for the joint degree program. So I'll stop here because I hear some hammering above.
Thanks, Cera. Yeah, that gives us an insight, and for sure, I'm sure when we get to the Q&A, there will be more questions for you. But I think it sounds very interesting to have a joint PhD program, and that brings with it its own challenges and opportunity, I'm sure. But for now, we'll move on to Nabanita, who's our fifth-year School of Design and Engineering PhD candidate, particularly in architecture. Nabanita, over to you.
Thank you, Shilpa. Can you hear me properly? Okay. Good afternoon to all the respected faculty members and attendees and my fellow PhD mates. I'm Nabanita and I'm from Bangladesh. I joined NUS for my PhD in 2016. So actually, this is not my fifth year. This is actually my sixth year because it was kind of a roller coaster journey for me. But my relationship with NUS goes back in 2009 because I did my master's in environmental management under the same school. And I totally agree with Pavia regarding the multidisciplinary attitude of all the schools of NUS. Yes, for me, the environmental management journey was a very enlightening one because my background is architecture. So I did my B.Arch in 2006. And after that, I was in active teaching in undergrad level. So when I went for this environmental management master's course, it gave me a very holistic view of many disciplines, different approaches from different disciplines. So it was a very enriching one. And I think at that particular period from 2009 to 2010 in NUS gave me a drive to go for NUS again during my PhD. So it was after I had my baby, and this time it was more challenging because I had my family with me. And I would say that NUS as a school made this journey, this challenging journey, very smooth for me, and it was extremely supportive. And I had my cancer in between, so the financial support, the logistic support, and the mental support that I received from the school and the staff, my teachers, my supervisors, it was extremely commendable. I'm ever grateful to them for that. So if you have any question further regarding the PhD journey, I can answer you later. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Nabanita. Thank you for being so open. And I think an important point to highlight here is that life doesn't stop with a PhD. I think a lot of candidates who are considering PhDs are hesitant because they think that, I have these plans and, how will I pursue these other plans if I enter a long-term degree? And I think you're correct that there is a balance that you can strike and the institution can play a big role. And I think Nabanita's journey is an example of that. Thank you so much for sharing. I'll quickly grab now 3 minutes of your time as well, audience. So I am not only the chair for today, but I'm also representing the Faculty of Law. So just as a student, a fifth-year student from Faculty of Law, I think it's fair to say that I should give you some insight into my journey. So I have now submitted my thesis, and I think in hindsight, I can tell you that my journey has been very intellectually challenging, extremely busy, yet quite exciting. And the reason for that, for you to get an insight, I need to give you a bit of a background. So I did my Bachelor's of Law degree from India, and then I went on to do my Master's of Law degree from Cambridge. And that's when I realized I had a passion to specialize in a particular area of corporate law. And I really wanted to be an expert in that area. And that drove me to the decision of doing a PhD. NUS worked out for me for 3 reasons. One, that it had the title of being a prestigious leading university in Asia. So that was important to me for the research facilities. Second, I would say the supervisor fit. I can't stress enough that in a PhD, your project value is highly determined on also how your supervisor views your project and understands your vision. So, you create this vision together and they are your sounding board. So I found my supervisor the perfect fit. And I think the funding, we haven't mentioned it so far, but no one can do a PhD unless, you can do a PhD, but I think it's a very hard journey without the right kind of funding, the right kind of tuition, the right kind of conference fund. So all 3 elements were given to me. I would just want to highlight 2 unique things about NUS. One was the diversity for me. So only 3 candidates per year are selected actually in the Faculty of Law. So it's highly competitive, but there are about 8 to 9 nationalities within the cohort, which really helps you if you're a comparative researcher. And they all have different backgrounds. So they range from being a judge to a fresh graduate, so that's really interesting. You may not find on the website. And the second unique thing I realized about NUS was a tailored approach. So in our first year, just as Pavia mentioned, that you have this qualification exam, but before you get to that point, before you qualify as a PhD candidate, they help you in this seminar called the Graduate Research Seminar on how to, conduct a literature review, how to tailor the overview of your thesis, how to categorize chapters. So a lot of students are afraid that I'm not going to enter the PhD program because I'm not experienced enough. And NUS filled that gap for me. So yeah, these are the reasons why my NUS journey was very, very exciting. I went for a fellowship to Netherlands. I did 3 international conferences and 8 guest lectures at 8 foreign universities. So yeah, that's a little insight into what I did during my time in law. And I think I've taken enough time, but I would be happy to take questions later on. But with that, we come to an end when it comes to the student panel. And I think it's exciting now to move over to the alumni panel, who have had some time to reflect back on how their journey has been. So without further ado, I think it would be good to transition over. Maybe we can begin with Professor Natarajan with his experience in the NUS Business School as a PhD student.
Okay. Thanks, Shilpi, and good afternoon to everyone. Currently I'm on the faculty of management at the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and as Shilpi mentioned, I had done my PhD in the business school at NUS, and my area is strategy and policy. When I began this journey, actually I was sort of a different student in terms of the experience that I had compared to my cohort mates. By undergraduate training, I'm an engineer. Then I worked for a few years. Then I also have an MBA, and I worked for a few more years in multinational companies after that. So I was doing well as a manager, and finally, then I decided to transition to doing a PhD. And one of the reasons that I transitioned was that this was the only profession that would allow me to think about management and actually pay me to do that. So it was actually paying me to do something that I was interested in, and I thought that was excellent. But I mean, there's a lot of talk about the intellectual journey of a PhD program, and I'm sure many of you would have heard it from the rest of the panelists and others as well. But there's one point that I want to highlight here, is that and this is something that I strongly believe in, is that one should treat the PhD journey or the PhD program as a job. It is not a normal academic program. It's not something like a bachelor's or master's where you study and clear exams. But one should actually, the approach that one must take should be as a manager, as you manage a job, because it is a long process. You need to be consistent. You need to monitor yourself. There are a lot of management things that one needs to do, your own time, your family, your emotions, so on and so forth. I mean, other than the intellectual journey that one has. So that's something that I encourage all of you who are interested in a PhD, not just at NUS, at any university, to keep in mind. Of course, NUS gives excellent support in all these dimensions, but do think of the PhD journey as a job and not just as another academic degree. All right, so that's that was the one message that I wanted to convey, and we can talk about it later. Thank you. Over to you, Shilpi.
Professor Natarajan, you mentioned such an important point. It's so important to be consistent, and it's intellectually challenging, but you're correct that you need to be consistently good at it, and you can't carry that cloud above your head the whole time. So I think you mentioned something so important, and I think in the Q&A section we'll try to focus a little bit on how the PhD is so different than a master's degree and undergraduate degree. Thanks for sharing. I will now transition over to Professor Hartley, who is joining us, could you tell us a little bit more about your PhD journey at Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy?
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And just a brief background on my journey. I worked in the field of urban planning, and I had done my urban planning master's degree from UC Berkeley, and I went and worked for the New Zealand government. So I came to the Lee Kuan Yew School with a background in both business as an MBA and also working in urban planning. So the interdisciplinary offerings at the Lee Kuan Yew School suited my background very well. And what I found as I arrived at NUS was that there was a wonderful opportunity to collaborate not only within the Lee Kuan Yew School, but across the campus. There's so many different departments across campus that are internationally well respected and are home to faculty members that have global reputations. So it was always interesting to be able not only to be involved at Lee Kuan Yew School itself and the many, many different seminars and discussions and visitors they had, but also to really look at the campus overall as my community and to be involved with events and to attend lectures and other things in other departments. For the Lee Kuan Yew School, since it's physically separated from the main campus, it's easy to think of it as kind of its own thing, but really it is fundamentally part of NUS. And I helped myself by living on campus at the NUS Kent Ridge campus for the first couple of years, which helped connect me a little better to campus. The thing that's been valuable for me at Lee Kuan Yew School are the networks in my field. Everybody in the field of public policy knows the Lee Kuan Yew School. It has a towering reputation in the region and a reputation around the world. The people that I worked with, I continue to work with now. The people that I had in class as professors continue to be my co-authors now, continue to be people who furnish recommendations or provide career advice or do actual collaborative work with me. I remember one of the professors telling me while I was in class that she thought of me more as a colleague than a student. And I think that really gets back to the spirit of how we should approach our PhD studies. This isn't just a more difficult version of a master's degree or even necessarily only a research skills or methods version of a master's degree, but it is fundamentally different. You're being not only formally trained, but also sort of informally socialized into an entire community and ecosphere of academia. So I encourage you, even though it appears as though you're just sitting in the classroom taking notes, doing tests, and turning assignments in, think of yourselves as colleagues, think of yourselves already as members of the academic community, because as PhD students, your position as a PhD student, your title as a PhD student or PhD candidate already confers a level of credibility that would not come otherwise. And thus, you should not feel shy about jumping out there into the academic community to participate in conferences, to search around for possible co-authors and collaborations, maybe to apply for grants, etc. So the PhD is not going to come to you simply by sitting in the classroom and doing your work, doing enough to get a grade. You've got to come to the PhD. You've got to be proactive, because what you're doing is not just acquiring the degree, but you're preparing yourself and your reputation for when you graduate. So what you have done above and beyond just simple classwork is going to be what separates you on the academic job market. And I can't emphasize that enough. And that requires kind of a mental change in how you look at yourself, not as a student, but as a community member. Finally, I'll say that the previous speaker was quite eloquent, Shirish, in talking about his different maxims. And one of the things that he said was to maintain a balance. And that's very important, to maintain a balance between your work and then your personal life. Singapore is a great place to do that, of course. For those of you who are coming in from outside of Singapore, it's a wonderful city, so much to do. The campus is easily connected to the center part of the city. Socialize with your colleagues, especially in a PhD program. These are going to be people who are going to move with you as a cohort through the profession for your entire life. Some of them will drop off, some of them will go to private sector, some of them will quit, but there will be some of them who are actually in the academic field as long as you will be. And so the connections that you make now, you're going to have with you. So get to know them not only in the context of the classroom, but socialize with them, learn about them, and create a real community, because you're going to need that support system when it comes to qualifying exams, and then down the road, as an academic, when you're called upon to put together an edited volume or a special issue, or you're trying to search for reviewers for a journal article, or you're trying to search for people to collaborate with, these are the first people you're going to go back to, because they're the people you know and the people you trust and the people with whom you share an intellectual history. So take that very seriously. I think I'll just conclude by saying you're not just you're not continuing to be a student in a more difficult program. You are transformed now into a PhD student, which think of yourselves already as members of the academic community, and behave that way. Write, talk to people, and jump into the community. Nobody's going to say, well, you're only a PhD student. Jump in and go to conferences, send emails to people, talk to people, and reach out. Otherwise, you're just going to be buried in the books. And like anything, this is it's a fundamentally social profession. It's about people, and it's about people trusting each other and knowing each other. So go ahead and develop it and move forward with that in mind. Thanks.
Thanks, Professor Hartley. That was really interesting and insightful, because I agree with you that when you enter the PhD program, you have to also enter with a different mindset and really earn your space. And it's interesting, because when I entered the programs in my first year, I felt very nervous. I was a new graduate student with not enough experience, and I behaved like that. I was like, no, like maybe the other people know a bit better than me. And I was told by my supervisor that maybe you think I know a bit better now, but at the end of the PhD journey, he would have won as a supervisor if we could talk as colleagues. So your advice is really valuable. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
So now we would move on to Professor Ying, who graduated from Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. Professor Yin, please, over to you.
Hey, can you hear me? Yeah, right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. Because still on the train, so I think the internet here is not very good. So just to remind me if there's any interruption. Okay. So it's been 10 years actually. I joined NUS community in 2011. So it's just a 10 years anniversary since I start this journey, right? And I'm now teaching Tsinghua University as an associate professor, teaching global history and modern history. So I'm studying Indian history in Singapore, and also the India-China relations indeed. And since I came to NUS, I find that it's really a very good community to study because, first of all, of course, I got a presidential graduate fellowship, which is very good graduate fellowship that I think most of you guys want to this fellowship. So just ask me any question if you want to apply. And then it's 2011 and I've got some $3,000. So of course, life here is very good. And I think I'm the first generation of residents in Huijun. And so at that time, 2011, Huijun is branding new, right? Everything is new. So and we have the money, we have the fellowship, so life there is definitely good, right? But I think that the one suggestion for students, especially for students from non-English speaking countries, right, came to Singapore, is just to merge, to establish connections and links with other people from other countries. For me, for the first semester, I stay in Singapore, right? I just stay in Huijun. I study in Huijun. I live in Huijun. I didn't go to my office. I didn't mix with other students from other countries. So it's not good for me. So and then one day, my supervisor came to me and tell me that, hi, Ying, you should go to the office. You should speak with students from Indonesia, Malaysia, India, Bangladesh. Anywhere, right? And I followed the order. Right? I went to the office. I talked with people. So that really shaped my scholarship. It really shaped my identity now. So I think that's really a good suggestion for new students or for whoever you want to come here. You just to merge with people, to take the opportunity of living in Singapore and talk with people from different.
I see that Professor Yin is breaking up a bit. I will just wait for a few seconds. All right, no worries. I think we have some technical issues there. But I think what Professor Yin was talking about in terms of funding and how much it makes your life easier is true. NUS does offer some outstanding funding, and the funding he referred to was the Graduate President Scholarship, which is a funding that you all must be considering, and you can ask him a question in the Q&A section. But what he also mentioned was diversity and how it shapes you and your vision in the 4 years or 5 years of your PhD program. And I remember that I myself in the 4 or 5 years have lived with flatmates from 11 different nationalities. So you learn a lot about different cultures and the way they think, and that trickles down to your research in some way. But yeah, we would just move on to our last alumni panelist, Professor Chen. Professor Chen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Shilpi, and the organizers for really the hard work in the successful virtual NUS Graduate School open house this year. I'm assistant professor at the Sosui-Hock School of Public Health. So maybe I should start with some of my journey, and then later on y'all can ask questions. I basically did my undergrad, my master's, and my PhD all in NUS. So I've been in NUS for a really, really long time. My background is in statistics. I have always been passionate about population health, with a particular interest on older adults research. So for these reasons, I pursued a PhD in public health. And then before I did an overseas postdoc in the US. My PhD supervisor once shared with me what Confucius once said: choose a job you love and you'll never have to work a day of your life. I definitely had a lot more fun in graduate school than undergrad. Nevertheless, graduate school is not a stroll in the park. I pursue research that generally excites me. Even now, sometimes still keep me up at night thinking how I can do better with the models in pursuit of a little piece of evidence that makes the Singapore a better place. I'm privileged to work with a very super supervisor, as well as other professors at the School of Public Health and in NUS. But this doesn't mean that there's no valley moments. I would relate a PhD like running a marathon. The toughest moments isn't when you're fresh, excited. It's really how you endure and finish the race. And I'm very thankful and grateful for professors and also like-minded friends who ran this PhD journey with me, spur each other on to greater heights. We still collaborate with all my peers in the PhD, also my professors who are also now my colleagues. So as a little bit of advice is PhD journey is not really like straightforward, and it's not really going to be something where you are going to have roses all day long. You need to know for yourself why you choose this journey, and don't lose sight of that passion, because at those value moments, these are your passion, and why you choose this journey is going to be what keeps you going in the toughest moments. Yeah, thank you. Over back to you.
Thank you, Professor Chen. That's true. It really is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and it's important not to burn out. It's important not to worry too much. It's interesting to share with the audience that, you know, when I first moved to Singapore as well, I looked down at my visa and I thought, oh, 1,000+ days, like I'm supposed to do this project of 80,000 words. And it's important to not let it get to you, to categorize your work and have some balance. So that is a very useful advice. Thank you for sharing. So now that I see we have had a chance to get little snippets from our panelists, this is the time for the audience to now speak up and ask the burning questions they must have for our panelists. I see that there are several questions that have already poured in. So maybe we can begin with, hello, my question is to Cera. I'm interested in the PhD program in English literature. Okay, so the question, my apologies, the question refers to whether you have to reside in Singapore during the candidature. That is more of a technical question, so let's try to focus on something more subjective, which would be useful for all. I think I'll take the next question by Anand that says how to keep motivated during a period, during the PhD, in the time of job uncertainty, unemployment, and career stress. This is a good question to answer because it helps everyone. So how do you keep motivated during the PhD, especially during the time of coronavirus? Maybe we can get an insight from one alumni and one student panelist. So we can begin with one of the students. So maybe Bhavya, would you like to answer this question? Because right now you are a student, you must have faced that uncertainty with the pandemic. What do you think about this question? How do you keep motivated?
Yeah, so it's the COVID thing really threw a lot of things off track. So last year, even I went back home and I couldn't come back to Singapore for like 6-7 months. So it was difficult, but I think now we're kind of adjusting to the situation, and it's not like anything has stopped. I mean, where conferences used to be in person, now they are virtual. Where speaker sessions used to be in person, now they're all on Zoom. And I find that in some ways it's actually opened new opportunities, because now I'm able to listen to people who are talking in Hong Kong or in London or somewhere, because all of it is on Zoom. So a lot of these webinars can be done that way. And I guess it's more about, it's like PhD. I mean, it's also like life, like whatever gets thrown at you, you kind of adapt to it and you reshape your approach, and it just goes on. So, and when it comes to staying positive and motivated during the PhD journey, so I think one of the other panelists also mentioned that it's not smooth. It's not like a bed of roses and you get thrown, like all kind of challenges get thrown at you. But yeah, even I would agree that it's like a marathon. So you have to keep the big picture in mind and not get swayed by, momentary highs or momentary lows or something like that. And I think at the end of the day, the goal for all of us is to become good researchers and to, sustain this in the long run. So yeah, that would be my sense.
That's very interesting to hear, Bhavya. And I think it would also be good to hear from someone who is doing the PhD even without the pandemic, when just the general uncertainties of the PhD. So maybe Professor Chen, maybe you would like to share with us, you've had a long journey in NUS. How did you keep motivated in the PhD program?
I ran a lot. Okay, so I think in a way, I chose something where I was excited and passionate about. But before I embarked on a PhD, it wasn't it didn't come like, oh, I know after my undergrad I wanted to do a PhD. Actually, I did a master's because my professors around me has been asking me to do a PhD. I don't really know whether I should do a PhD because I was looking at the jobs I was interested in. So I was interested to be a policy analyst, and then I was offered to work in the Prime Minister's office as a policy analyst after my master's. So I went out, I worked, and then I realized that, okay, I cannot really stand the bureaucracy, so I came back and do a PhD. But my PhD itself, I was interested to know, and I was interested to evaluate policy. When I was in Prime Minister's office as a policy analyst, I realized I didn't really have the skills to be able to do what I wanted to do. So I went out, tried, came back with a very different drive and a very different motivation because of what excites me generally. I know what's out there, and I had both the push and pull factor to come back and do a PhD. So for me, it was really a passion that I want to do research that will benefit older adults in Singapore. And now I'm still doing it. I'm still evaluating policies for the government. But now I'm doing it as an external party, as an academic. So I don't really need to prove to the government that their policy works. I just need to show them what the data says. And then they will tweak the policies relevantly to be able to make better policies. So in a way, I would think as you're trying to decide whether to do a PhD or not, the PhD does come at opportunity cost because the duration that you need to do a PhD, you need to be very clear for yourself why is it that you want to do a PhD and why is the push factor. Definitely money cannot be that because it is not going to be, it's not something, doing a PhD is not something where you give you a lot of riches in the world. So if it's money, then I'll suggest you should go banking, finance or something else and not a PhD. But it must be something you're passionate about, that you're willing to do research so that at the valley moments, you would still continue to push through and carry on. And that's where you bloom and that's where you grow. It's not really in the smooth sailing moments that you see growth. It's really in the valley moments that you see growth. But you must be passionate about the research that you choose. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing, Professor Chen. I agree with you that actually I thought that the PhD is a mental and a physical challenge. So one thing that helped me as well was to swim a lot. Of course, when it comes to the mental challenge, it's important to have perspective for why you're doing this and to really go back to the roots of what motivated you to do the research, because it can be hard. I see there is a panelist who would also like to answer this question. Let me see, who's this? I'm just trying to get the view. The panelist who has raised their hands. Hold on.
Shilpa, it's me.
Yeah, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, It's actually to respond to the question about the motivation. Well, I think the biggest motivation that you might have as a graduate student, whether you're a master's or PhD, is that you're getting paid for producing knowledge. I think that's the biggest motivation. I mean, you know, that's the biggest motivation. And there's always somebody out there who is in a worse situation than you, who is not getting paid for even the hardest labor, not getting paid properly. But we are just, sometimes when I used to, I'm working with the informal street hawkers. So when I used to sit at the Starbucks at Utown and doing my research in the aircon, in a glass of Starbucks coffee in my hand, I used to think that, okay, the people whom I'm researching on, they're doing hard labors. I'm in a better situation. So I think that's the biggest motivation that you can have while your PhD journey. Yeah.
That's very true. Thanks for sharing, Nabanita. I think that really helps. What we'll do is now we'll move on to another question by the audience. So let me see if there's something interesting for us. Yes, this is so wonderful. We have a question from Kai. The question is, do you have any advice for any undergraduate students who are thinking of pursuing a master's or a PhD? What are some things that students can do better to prepare themselves for a PhD? So to make it easy, what are the tips probably to make it easier to enter the NUS PhD program? How can you become a better applicant? What should you do? What should be probably even step one? So let's get a student on board and an alumni on board. Maybe we can start with Houning. Would you like to share with us any tips for prospective applicants in your particular faculty field?
Yeah, sure. I think it's a spot-on question because I come straight up from my undergrad study and then start my PhD without doing a master. So it's a great question, and I feel pretty much related to it. So I have two suggestions. One is more about the hard, concrete type of suggestions, and then I'll give a soft suggestions. So, and specifically back to my discipline in finance and economics, there has been, in the past 5 years, there's been a phenomenal thing going on, which is called pre-doc. So it's not postdoc, it's pre-doc, like people doing research before actually entering into a PhD program. And usually it's about 2 years in length, and it's through a research assistantship with an affiliated professor or faculty. I think the great part of that is it gives you strong letters, and it gives you a sense of what research is going on. So to me, if I reflect back to my PhD applicants, I think what really got me through the door is recommendation letters from my professor at SMU. I think the key factor is recommendation letters kills information asymmetric. And information asymmetric is probably the number one thing recruitment committee is concerned about, because it's hard for them to evaluate who you are just from the transcript, just from your CV. I think they require interactions, they require a length of time of interactions. So that makes an explanation why the pre-docs is going on. If you want to get into, for instance, a finance PhD program or academic PhD or economic PhD program. So this is the hard concrete suggestions I have. A soft suggestions would be something about, let's assume you get through the first round, that your resume is good enough to get you to an interview. That's where the soft skills start to shine. One thing is that is pretty tailored and specific to a finance PhD is you need to distinguish yourself by sending some signal. Recruitment committee in finance, they're concerned about students coming in with a distorted motivation. They think, I mean, everybody thinks finance is linked to probably a better career in the industry. But we're in a niche. In the business school, we do research. I mean, finance PhD and finance faculty, we are just researchers like everybody here. So you want to send some signal that you enter the program because you want to do research, not because you want to have a better degree to join a bank or join a consulting firm, use this as a letter type of thing. So I think you want to put this up front, that you love research, you want to be a good researcher, and you want to chip in this 5 years to really devote yourself in the academic career. So that's, I think, is a soft signal that you can leverage on, but don't use that as a technique. Ask yourself, truly, more like a check mark. If you really like research, then go ahead. I think that will smooth out your application process. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Hartley. Maybe Professor Natarajan, would you also like to add some tips on what you think would help prospective students get into PhD program at NUS?
Yeah, all right. So I think Houning got it spot on, but let me frame it in a slightly different manner. To me, getting in is not the challenge. Getting out successfully is the challenge. So that means that you can even get out of a PhD program and it may not be successful. So you may complete a PhD, but what does successfully completing a PhD program really mean? Typically, in most research-oriented universities, in at least the top schools, that would mean getting an academic job. So therefore, any undergraduates or master students who might be interested in PhD should very clearly understand what the end goal is, right? So the end goal is not simply to receive a PhD degree. The end goal is to become a member of the academic community, to become an academic, right? And if there is any other, if you are not interested in that kind of a lifestyle or that kind of a job, of course, this may vary across different faculties. They may have their own norms, but if you are not interested in the end result of the PhD program, then you need to probably reconsider whether you should apply or not. So my first sort of suggestion would be research as much as you can about what is the end goal of a PhD program, or what do graduates actually do? What is the life of an academic like? And then think about whether you want to work in those places. And once you're convinced, then you can apply. I mean, your application, probably you're going to be doing it. You have your grades, you have your score, so on and so forth. But try and get as much as information as possible about the program. And like you said, a great way to do that is through being a research assistant. And try to get on some actual live research projects that are going on. Many professors typically have requirements for research assistants. It will be good to get some sort of summer internships with faculty members so that you can understand the nature of the job and what they do. And then you can decide whether you actually want to pursue it or not. Right? Because in my experience, many people do get very successfully enter the program, but after year 3 or year 4, many of the struggles are because of a mismatch between what they expected as the outcome versus what they actually experience. So your expectations need to be very clear when you get into the program.
That is excellent advice. Actually, yeah.
I cannot agree more. It's add value from people who've gone through the journey. Totally, yeah. Cannot agree more.
Thank you, Professor Natarajan. That was excellent. Think about what is a successful out. We have another panelist who would like to chip in. Please unmute yourself and ask, and please share with us.
Yes, just in terms of strategies to be successful going in, just as this PhD is not simply a harder version of a master's, so too do your master's degree strategies might not work as well in the PhD. So I would encourage you to think about prioritizing your workload and thinking about what you need to do and what you don't. And that sounds like, to some people, that might sound like controversial advice. But when you're loaded down with, let's say, 20 articles a week to read across your various seminars, when you're loaded down with possibly a book to read a week or more, you are going to wilt and burn out if you attempt to read every single word of everything that's assigned to you. And academics face this challenge too. When we need to produce papers, a number of papers per year, we've got to do literature reviews. We've got to be familiar with what's going on in the field. And yet we have teaching, we have administration, we have everything else pulling at us. We have to find strategies to synthesize information as well as possible without reading cover to cover, quite simply. And I tell my students when they read a journal article, particularly even an empirical journal article, you're not reading it like a book. You're not reading it like a novel. You don't go front to back. You go into the article looking for the information that you might need. If you're more curious about the lit review, if you're more curious about the policy implications or about the methods, et cetera. And why is there even an introduction and a conclusion if we aren't supposed to read those to get a sense of the paper if we don't have time to read the entire paper? That's why those things are included. So what I'm telling you is release yourself from the expectation and the pressure to read word for word every single thing you're assigned. If you try to do that by week 3, you're going to be pulling your hair out and running for the hills. Now, it's not just simply reading an abstract or reading an introduction. You have to come up with a kind of way perhaps to do an outline of a paper where you go in and you extract particular things about that paper, whether it's, to what literature is that paper oriented, what type of methods is it using, quantitative, qualitative, regression analysis, whatever it might be, and then, sort of kind of summary findings of it as well. I am not in the legal field, and some people here are, but I am aware that my legal colleagues and friends have to do outlines of cases, case briefs, things like that. That involves going in and extracting information that you need and summarizing it and synthesizing it. So the journal articles are primarily the way that we communicate with each other in the field of academia. In some fields, of course, it is about the books as well, but I know that in the more applied social sciences, including public policy, it's really about the journal article. So being able to have a strategy for how do you approach a journal article, set yourself a limit. I'm going to spend a half an hour with this and get as much out of it as you can, and then walk away and keep going. You can't go down those rabbit holes and you'll destroy your experience and hate yourself if you try to do every single thing. You don't need to read cover to cover. So that's just one of many recommendations I would give, but I think it's something you can use right off the bat when you jump into the program.
That's really helpful, Professor Hartley. Actually, maybe you could also kickstart our next question because you're an alumni. And it said that, let's see, we have this top question for all the alumni panelists, so please feel free to jump in. And it says, I'm wondering what's something you wish you had done more during your PhD, now that you have gained perspective as professors. So that would be good. The first part of the question would be good to know about.
Okay, I guess since I have the field, I'll go ahead and start. You can't emphasize enough the value of networking and getting to know people. And not every single person you meet, you're going to maybe meet again, or you're going to actually end up in a long-term collaboration with, or even a personal friendship with. But statistically, the more you try out, the more people you put yourself in front of, the more likely it is you're going to find somebody that you gel well with, including as a possible research partner. So even though you're buried in the books and you're buried in classes and you're thinking about exams, you think this just the next exam is the most important thing in my life. Well, it's not. Zoom out and think about there will be life after the PhD. You don't think it's ever going to happen because 4 years, 5 years sounds like an eternity. There will be. And at that time, you're going to enter a field that's, as I said before, a field of people. And the more you can get to know people within the department, formally and informally, set up meetings with people, or just go to their lectures, go to lectures that are like guest lectures or public lectures, and don't just leave the lecture afterwards. Go down to down to the floor and wait in line to meet the person and shake their hand and say you like their work, especially if it's something to do with what you do. Do the same thing at conferences, etc. So don't lose sight of the fact that you are, as I think somebody earlier said, you're managing a process, you're managing your career at this point. You're not simply, you're not simply stuck in the book sitting in a classroom. You're now a visible member of the academic community. So behave like it by networking, meeting people, and looking for opportunities to get yourself out there. I would also say, just very briefly, be self-promotional. I don't think, some people might say, well, that's kind of egotistical or arrogant or whatever. No, be self-promotional. Set up your own website, manage it. Anything you write or do, put it on that website. Set up a professional Twitter account, not the Twitter account where you share pictures of cats or your dinner or your holidays. Set up one that says like your name, PhD student, or doctor, your name, or whatever it is, and use that to circulate your stuff. And then also follow people, follow every professor you can find. About half of them might follow you back. And it doesn't mean you have to participate in discussions on Twitter, but it is, I find nowadays the circulation of information on Twitter, which is so up to date, is very important. It gets bad rap because there's a lot of bad stuff out on Twitter, but within communities of academics, this is how people often share their new works, their new writings, and anything related to the field, like conferences, job announcements, everything else. So that's another way that you can be visible in the field right now. You don't have to wait until you're out.
That was really useful to hear. Would another alumni like to share what they wish they had known during their PhD? So we have Professor Ying, maybe Professor.
Hey.
Hi. Yes.
Hey. I'm sorry. I'm still on the road. So yeah, I heard the question that what should I do if what I wish to do, but I haven't do during my PhD, right? And I think I have done my best actually. I published 2 articles during my PhD tenureship, so which means that when I went to the job market, I had some 2-tier top tier journal articles in hand. That makes me guarantee a postdoc position in NYU Shanghai. And then after the postdoc, I find my current job. So my suggestion is that if you can, you just publish as many as possible. And the first step is to know that what kind of the journals in your field is the best journals, right? So I think this is the first lesson that every PhD candidate or every PhD graduate student need to know, that in your field, which journal is your candidate journal, right? Which journal you should publish, which journal will make your name be heard, right? So you must locate the publication list, right? So then you have a plan, just like a manager, right? You have a plan from the first day, from the very beginning, that how many articles I'm gonna write each year, or how many articles I'm gonna write each semester. So for my own case, right, I had some 4 articles being written during my PhD, and 2 published, and the other 2 published after my during my postdoc. So you always have a plan that I need 2 articles nowadays to get a postdoc position or to get a tenure track position, and then we have another 2 articles already been written during my PhD but haven't been published, but then I can use them to find a tenure track job, right? So it's a good planning. So from the first day, you must have a plan. You must be a manager of yourself. So that's my suggestion. Yeah. Thanks.
I think that's really good advice, and publishing is a huge part of the PhD. Thank you for sharing. Okay, well, I see a hand is raised. Is this? Okay, what we'll do is we'll move on to another question, so we give all the panelists a chance to speak. So we have a question for Cera here. Cera, this is for you. Do you have any suggestions on how to write a research proposal that will be accepted? Especially since I'm interested in applying for a scholarship or a joint program.
I see. It's been a while since I wrote my research proposal. I think maybe anyone can jump in here to add on, but it is important to note that what you submit for your research proposal will not eventually map onto what you go on to research. So you will expect it to drastically change from the moment you submit it, and after you do your QE, and even when you submit your dissertation. With regard to the joint degree program, I think there was another attendee who asked this, but I think they've already left. But for the joint degree program, I am with literature at NUS and the digital humanities at King's College. So it was interesting to note that the digital humanities was not one of the departments listed for a joint degree program with NUS, but because I had a supervisor from that department at King's to agree to supervise me, and I got in contact with the ELL department, the literature department, and it worked something out, and now digital humanities is listed as one of the departments that you can do a joint degree program with. So it's important that you know that option exists, that you can approach a supervisor of your choice from King's College, and even if they are not from the department listed on the website, you can very well arrange for it to be. So I hope that answers the question more or less.
I'm sure that is extremely helpful. Thanks, Cera. Maybe even Nabanita, you want to jump in and maybe from your perspective and your faculty offers us some insight on how to write a research proposal that will be accepted.
Okay, thank you for the question. Well, for me, I took I think too long time to prepare my research proposal, but when I sent it to my selected supervisor before applying for the PhD program itself, I contacted my supervisor, and yeah, it was, I won't say that it was very detailed out, but it showed my area of research in a broader sense. So I would say that now my research proposal varies from where it started, but the broader area of research is still the same. So what I think is what supervisors look for is that you have a genuine interest in this research area, and you are aware of what's happening in that research area, and you're capable of handling your quest for new questions. So you might not be very proficient in the methods that you're mentioning, but you know your area of research. So I think that's very important for a supervisor for selecting the prospective PhD students. Yes.
That's extremely helpful as well. I agree that the research proposal, I agree with both panelists that the research proposal changes a lot, and having a good grasp of your entire research area is an excellent point to start as well. But actually, there was a very interesting question here for our alumni that disappeared, but it was basically, what is it that, when a supervisor agrees to supervise you, what is it that they are looking for, or alternative way of putting this would be how to find the right fit with a supervisor, how to select them, and then increase your chances of them selecting you. And maybe hearing from our alumni would be useful here because they're now obviously academics. So maybe Professor Chen, you could tell us a little bit about that.
Right, thank you for the good question. So when I look at a research proposal, a few things needs to come to mind. A is whether the background and training doesn't match. So in a sense, if my research is modeling specific, I'm trying to model what the policy is for Singapore, it requires someone with technical skill. But beyond that, it also needs to show the person's passion and perseverance. because to model something that is high level, that you have multiple driving factors, it's going to be challenging. So the model may not work the way you think it will work. So you need to keep tweaking. But if the proposal doesn't come, it comes off as someone who is not passionate about it, then it is unlikely that I would interview the student. So I think one of the things for the student would be to look at the professors whose research interest matches yours. So for instance, I'm excited about older adults research. Then if you are a top student, but you're more interested in child health, then we are not going to, it's going to be very hard to match, because when I'm talking about older adults, the constraints and everything is very different from a child and what the child needs. So the first step is, first think about what is it that genuinely excites you. If you're in between a master's and a PhD and you're not very sure what to choose, then the suggestion would be take a look at what's the job that you are interested to pursue. If the job that you're interested to pursue, most of it that's offered, for instance, for myself as an example, I was interested to do policy. I was interested to analyze policy. So when I look across the board, the ministry, when they're hiring policy analysts, they're looking at undergrad, good degree or a master's degree. When it comes to a doctorate degree, the offers are a lot lesser. So in that sense, and I'm not sure what to do, I did a master's first. I went out to try. I came back with a different drive. So if you are deciding between a master's or a PhD and you're not very sure, it is good to try first, like either a research assistant or do a master's. You think that it's a waste of time, but honestly it's not, because in a sense, a master's, you also learn something. And then you know for yourself whether are you cut up for research or not. Research is a challenging process. You're always trying to do better work, not only with other people, but with yourself. Like you're trying to build better models and trying to be better, a better researcher constantly. So you must be passionate, you must persevere. And I think when it comes to the background and training and experience, it will definitely differ across the different disciplines. Yeah, for the School of Public Health, we take in people in all disciplines, because population health, you require different skill sets. For other faculty, maybe like, I don't know, law, that it require you to maybe have some law background or law degree. Yeah, so in a sense, I think the professors, some of us actually do look at your background and training. But other than that is, in your proposal, it needs to show whether why are you excited about the research, why are you passionate about research. Yeah, I hope it answers the question.
I think you had lots of practical tips there as well. Thank you so much. Any other alumni panelists? I see a hand raised. Would like to jump in and give us insight how to find the perfect fit for the supervisor. Maybe you're looking for PhD students. Professor Natarajan, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, so one practical tip of how to find a supervisor. Of course, one is the area of your research interest, and the area that the academic is doing should be same, or at least should have a fair degree of overlap. Yeah, if that's not there, then typically the relationship won't go through. The second is, it's always good to talk to existing students of the faculty that you're interested in. Even if there is an overlap of research interest, you also want to figure out how a particular professor works, their working style, their methods, are they a good colleague to work with, so on and so forth. There are lots of soft issues that are involved because research projects are typically multi-year projects or long period of time. So you want to find out about the supervisor as a person. And that typically happens by talking to colleagues of the supervisor or existing students. So talk to the students, the existing PhD students, and they will tell you how the professors are. And I think that's something that you can do.
Thank you so much. That's very useful for prospective students. Okay, let's try to get some more insights from our current student panel. So I was thinking it would be a good idea to tell the audience a little bit about how different the journey has been for you, when you did your undergraduate degree or your master's degree to a PhD degree. So what has been the biggest difference? What has been the biggest challenge possibly? And how have you overcome it? Maybe we can start with Cera. Cera, would you like to give us some insight into how it's different for you and what is the biggest challenge you have faced?
I think the main difference, well, the undergraduate requirements, I would say, is summarized as learning how to write a good essay, and the questions tend to be posed for you. Your first foray into the masters, you'll learn to craft your own question, that is to say, ask a specific research question that you feel your thesis can answer. For the dissertation, it is really a matter of scope, and the question cannot, at least from my experience, the question no longer comes just from you, the question comes from the field itself. So the PhD is really all about what kind of questions can arise from the field. And yes, you will be asking the question, but it is really half your question and half what the field needs you to ask as well. So that was my experience.
Yes, that is true. And you have to be open-minded to find the gap in the literature, so you're contributing to the field. Any other student panelists? Maybe Bhavya, if you would like to tell us a big difference from your undergraduate master's degree, a big challenge you have faced during the PhD?
I think one of the biggest differences is that in the PhD, we are trying to create new knowledge. So whatever you read and whatever you absorb, you have to read it critically to not take everything at face value. So for that, firstly, you need to develop a base, and then to develop this critical thinking, which is you kind of do it also in the masters, but in the PhD, it's the central part of when you're reading. And the other thing I found that's very different is when you're doing a taught course like a undergrad or a master's degree, you tend to have a larger class size, and there's diversity there also, but there are people who you can talk to who are also learning the same things that you are. But I feel that in a PhD, and maybe this is specific to me because I'm doing interdisciplinary research where everyone's, even in my cohort, people are doing very different things. Somebody's doing urban planning, somebody's doing gender development, I'm doing more macro and political economy. So I feel like the number of people who overlap with your research area are fewer. So you maybe have to seek out other people that you can talk to, professors or colleagues or other researchers. That I feel is a little bit different from the master's courses. Yeah.
I think I agree with you there. I do also feel that PhD comes with this sense of loneliness because you're so consumed by your own ideas, but it doesn't have to be like that. But unfortunately, it can be if you don't discuss with the colleagues and your supervisors. We have someone who's raised their hand. Please jump in.
Hi. Yeah, I think the biggest difference that I found from my undergrad till now is that undergrad just teaches you, whichever discipline you are, it just teaches you what things are. So I was in architecture, so I learned, okay, what is architecture? Okay, but I was not taught to think why I should do architecture. So I think master's was the first level where I always say that I learned what I don't know. So how much I don't know and how much I should, receive from the other ends, other disciplines. So that was my learning in that brief 1 year. And in PhD, I think what we are all of us are pursuing is that our degree is Doctor of Philosophy. So we are actually, I think we are trying to develop a particular worldview that with that we will embark on when we are going into a profession or activism or whatever it is. But this PhD journey should, shape up that worldview, that philosophical worldview, and your philosophy of the world. That's what PhD do. Whatever the discipline is, whatever the process is. Yeah.
I think that's really good insight. I see another person wants to jump in. Houning, is that you?
Yes, that's me. Let me make sure I open the video. Yes. So I think all the rest of panelists has mentioned this nice gap between undergrad and the graduate study. Being a fifth-year PhD student who almost seeing the finishing touch of the journey, I think I want to highlight that PhD is not a single step thing, it's 5 years. There are also huge gaps in each stage of the PhD journey. For instance, for our non-STEM majors, and a lot of us don't have advisors to begin with. We spend the first 2 years doing housework, at least on the paper, first 2 years are housework and the QE, and then you start on research type of thing. So that's probably on the paper, this is the biggest gap. Maybe one of my suggestions to prospective students is you can try to do something beyond the paper. Treat your first 2 years as a long internship, which you take it to, I think the #1 goal is not to get a grade, but to work with a professor, to work with faculty. So that also goes back to a lot of questions being asked before, but in a much more practical way. How do you find your advisor? When do you start that? It's not start after your QE. It should start way before you get your candidacy, right? And also, I think working with professors also helps you to realize what's a research interest, what the niche you want to be in. And that helps you to identify, I think the most importantly, the gap between your idea and to a publishable paper, because as many of the panelists mentioned, this is our singular goal in sacrificing our youth and 5 years is we want to publish papers. Okay, so I think that what renounced to me is view your PhD not only on the paper. First 2 years, absolutely you want to get training on the coursework, on the hard skill, but also work with professors, starting from day one, if you can. And then after QE is really to identify what crafts you need to develop your ideas and to publish. Okay, yeah, so it's my 2 cents.
Thanks for sharing, Houning. That's really interesting. Okay, so now I see we just have about 5 minutes left, and we can take one question, possibly 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Whoever is really, I would really like the audience to ask any questions that they have. They feel that it hasn't been answered yet. Is there anything that the audience wants to know from our panelists? Please type up your questions. Yeah, Vimal. Vimal has raised a hand. Would you like to answer live? Hi, Shilpi, I understand you're representing the Faculty of Law. I'm interested in pursuing a PhD in the area of fintech and law, and more narrowly in the study of regulation of crypto asset trading and the use of distributed ledger technologies. I shall be most grateful if you will advise of a PhD supervisor at the NUS Faculty of Law who I should approach for this area. Thanks, Vimal, for your question. Well, to be honest, I'm not sure who would be perfect just off the top of my head. But I think a good place to start would be to look at the faculty list. and look at professors who are specializing in area of fintech, and then look at their latest publications to see if this is an area they're interested in. What I did during my time, I was quite confused because my topic was so specialized. I actually emailed the professor. So maybe you can shortlist a few professors and email them and ask them if this is an area that they're interested in supervising you. But that would be my advice. All right, so well, we have about 3 minutes left for the session. I would not like to run overboard. So in this session, just to summarize, I think we touched upon so many aspects ranging from motivation, what students can do to prepare themselves, how different it is from a master's degree to do a PhD. If you have any more burning questions, I'm sure the panelists would be happily to answer your emails, or the NUS departments would answer your queries on the technical questions. I would just like to say a big thank you to everybody, all the alumni and the students for taking the time to attend the session. So just would like to end with that. And thank you, audience, for listening to us, participating. Hope we have given you all your answers.
Thank you, Shilpa, for your wonderful moderation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Have a nice day.
Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.